Good to see everyone here this morning. It is a beautiful day. This morning we're going to be looking here in Proverbs chapter 4 and what the writer of Proverbs has to say, what the writer of Proverbs gives in all of this. Now, there are sections in the book of Proverbs that are not Proverbs per se. It's in the book. There's plenty of sections, plenty of chapters where it is one proverb after another, after another, after another. But there are also sections of Proverbs that's discussing the book and the fact that you need this learning. There is a plea to do right and to follow wisdom. There is also the personification of wisdom. Wisdom cries out in the streets, in the concourses, in the marketplace. It is calling out, asking for anyone to listen. And wisdom is personified as this woman who is calling out and willing to give everything we need, willing to give. Wisdom also says in that if you won't follow, that wisdom will be laughing at you when you fall into your calamity, the calamity that is sure to happen. There have been times I've had to deal with children, and when I mean children, I mean those like 18 years and under, of where they don't have certain experiences and they don't have an understanding of certain things that someone with more time under their belt, with more time, does. And try to tell them that if you do this, this is going to be disaster. And I can tell you why it's going to be disaster, but in their mind, I don't know what's going on in their mind, it's kind of muddled up. No, I can make it anyway. And it's so predictable. It's so predictable that what you're doing is going to go wrong. It's not going to come out with the results that you were hoping for. It's going to be completely different. And then it doesn't take long till you find out, yeah, it failed. What they were doing, tried to do, failed. Well, that is what wisdom, unless this is the wisdom from God, this is God speaking His wisdom to us through the Holy Spirit, inspired through the writers here, that we have words from God to live by. And there are pleas, admonitions in the book of Proverbs that the things that you are learning, that the things that you will learn in this book, that you hold on to those things, and the things that are yet to come, which are going to go beyond this book, that you hold on to that because it is going to be your life. Now, let's just look Proverbs 4 and begin in verse 1. Hear, my children, the instruction of a father, and give attention to no understanding. For I give you good doctrine. Do not forsake my law. When I was my father's son, tender and the only one in the sight of my mother, he also taught me and said to me, let your heart retain my words, keep my commandments, and live. This continues on. This is going from parent to child, then on to the next child, and on to the next generation. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's the way it is. And then when we get to verse 10, we have this admonition, hear my words, son, and receive my sayings, and the years of your life will be many. Now here is promise. We'll get to that promise in just a bit. But here is this admonition, hear my sayings, or hear, my son, and receive my sayings. Take them. And in the promise that He's given, that your years will be many, in that is the reason you should be reading this. The reason that this son or this child should be reading it, and the reason we should be reading it. Here is the book value. Why expend the time and the energy and all that reading the book of Proverbs? Why do it? Of what value is it? Is it worth my time? Well, if years of your life will be many is worth your while, which I think it is, if it's worth your while, the answer would be yes. This is worth your time and all the energy, all the efforts required to read it. And the book of Proverbs is not that long anyway. It's not that difficult to read either. And here is the book value. Here is the reason you should be paying attention to what is here. Hear, my son, and receive my sayings. So why should I read this book? Why take the time? What good is it? Well, this can extend your life. This is going to make your life much, much better. Something that, as he's going to explain, money can't do. Money can't do this. Good health cannot do this. Education in secular things cannot do this. Having a great occupation can't do this. That's the same as basically money, except with an occupation we throw in, a nice self-satisfaction that you're doing something with great skill. But none of those things can take the place of wisdom. None of them can. And so here, among all this, he's already been giving Proverbs. He's already been giving Proverbs. He's been giving these, and now is saying, here, let me reiterate. Let me advise you a little more. Let me admonish you a little more. Hear these things. And he does it, actually, in the book. If we go to chapter 3 in verse 1, my son, do not forget my law, and my son, do not forget my law, but let your heart keep my commandments, for length of days and long life and peace they will add to you. Well, that's valuable. That's valuable. Someone who does not want these things is someone who really has to rethink. Someone who does not want this as going in the wrong direction. That person is foolish. That's all there is to say about that. That person is just someone who has fooled themselves. They're going into the absolute opposite way, into just utter self-destruction. Now, we can also go to chapter 6 and verse 20. Chapter 6, verse 20, my son, keep your father's command and do not forsake the law of your mother. Bind them continually upon your heart. Tie them around your neck. When you roam, they will lead you. When you sleep, they will keep you. When you awake, they will speak with you. For the commandment is a lamp and the law a light. Reproofs of instruction are the way of life. Here is this continual admonition that is there. Now, what he's about to say in this is that he has done his part. He's done his part. Now, it's our turn as the reader, as the child. It's our part now that the one who has penned this has done their part. They've done the work that was required on them. We can take this just from Solomon, now going to the Holy Spirit and going to the entire Godhead, that the Godhead has done their work entirely. They've done it. They've set everything that we need, and they have given us the instruction we need to get through this life to where we can do precisely as described beginning in verse 22. When you roam, they will lead you. When you sleep, they will keep you. When you are awake, they will speak with you. As a lamp, described as a light, and described as the way of life. Exactly like that. To where God's words, God's principles, God's ways are the first of your ways. Becomes that. That is the very thing, not just, remembering God, not just when times are bad, but all the time. And with some, they do the absolute. The only time they remember God is when they're angry at Him. That's the only time. Otherwise, He is of no thought, no concern whatsoever. But Proverbs is trying to direct the hearer, try to direct the reader in a different direction altogether. So let's go back to chapter 4, verse 10. The first word in this is hear. Now, we could take that, I hadn't even thought about it until just this moment. We could take that word hear in our class for word studies, and perhaps we should. That word hear, because the word hear, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. And we can see where a prophecy from Isaiah that they have ears to hear, but they're not hearing. They have eyes to see, but they are not seeing. They have all the equipment, everything, the ability to take in the words of God, the ability to reason out the words of God, the will to do the words of God, the conscience to help guide, to understand, the Word of God is the way that's right, and yet reject it altogether. Reject it altogether. This word hear does mean comprehend. Well, first off, it does mean to take in. It does mean that. But that word hear also is that of comprehension, of understanding what you have taken in, understanding it, or at least that of an interest to where you would want to understand it. Granted, there are, as Peter said, there are scriptures that are more difficult than others. Now, he was talking specifically about the writings of Paul there at the end of 2 Peter. He's talking about the writings of Paul, that there are some things harder to understand. But there's also a lot of things that are easy to understand. And when we come across something that's hard to understand, what is the first thing we need to do? Actually, is to begin looking into the rest of Scripture. Where is this same subject being talked about in simpler language, and go there to understand the harder passages. All right, I'm bringing this in because someone who truly is not hearing is someone who has no interest at all. No interest at all. Just as Jesus states in Matthew chapter 13, parable of the sower, you have the first ground described there is that packed ground, the wayside, where no seed grows at all because there was no love for the word. It was meaningless to begin with. They could not comprehend it to begin with and had no concern that they should. Now, I'll go to power tools again. Not too long ago I was doing this, but a different thing today. When I buy a new power tool and I get out the manual and I see, oh, this is in Korean. Oh, this is in, what is that, French? Oh, this is in Spanish. Oh, this is in, what is that? I don't know what that is. Okay, and finally I find English. Okay, I go there. All right, someone who cares nothing about the safety of working with this tool or wants to know how to work this power tool, whatever it is, they're going to just see the instructions and can't understand a word of it, toss it aside, and just do whatever with it. Just do whatever. Someone who has truly an interest is going to say, okay, what do I need to do here? I gotta find this in English. Sometimes you have to turn it upside down and look for it that way, the way they do certain publications. Anyway, that is showing an interest. That's showing an interest. That if something, and the book of Proverbs does talk about hard sayings or dark sayings, and those are things that can be more difficult to comprehend. Some things that seem kind of mysterious, kind of obscure. What does that mean anyway? But it doesn't say, matter of fact, the book of Proverbs says to understand those things, to gain from those things. What may be a mystery or something misunderstood or completely twisted by someone else. Well, it doesn't have to be that way with you or me, that we can understand these things and we can be guided by these things. But the first word is hear. Take heed is also part of that word hear. Not just that of taking it in, comprehending it, but it does mean to heed. And we use that phrase again, let him who has ears to hear, let him hear. Okay? And it's more than just, actually, I got the words and I can repeat the words back to you. But let him hear is that this is important to you and you're actually going to apply it. That it's important to you and you're actually going to use it. That's important to you and you're going to modify your life accordingly. That's what is required. That is required, taking heed. Now, the next word, hear my son, and receive, that's to accept. That is to take it, to receive my sayings, to accept them. And the years of your life will be many. Here is positive results. You do this, here is what is going to happen by doing that. It concerns your life. It concerns your life. All right, that's no trivial matter. It concerns actually more than your life here, but in eternity. And that's no trivial matter. All of this is what is at stake. All of this is precisely what is being addressed here. Now, we have in this verse, I'm going to read it again. Hear my son and receive my sayings, and the years of your life will be many. All right. This is very similar to places such as Isaiah chapter 1 and verse 18. This is very similar in style. Isaiah 1:18. Come, let us reason together. Different circumstance. Here in the book of Proverbs is teaching a child, teaching someone how they are to go, teaching things. In Isaiah chapter 1, it is trying to bring back a rebellious people. But come, let us reason together. In Matthew chapter 26 and 24, Jesus states, the Son of Man indeed goes just as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been good for that man if he had not been born. All right, why am I bringing that out? Jesus is talking about his death, and he's talking about the one who's going to betray him. And he says it would have been better if that one had not been born, if that man had not been born. And that man, Judas Iscariot, who would betray him, is in the room when he's saying that. And Judas Iscariot, now we were discussing this a number of weeks ago when we were going through the book of Mark, that Judas Iscariot already knew he was going to betray Jesus. When Jesus speaks these words, Judas has already made the arrangements. He's already made the deal. He knows what he's going to do and what he's going to be paid when he does it. It's all been done. It's all been done. And Jesus here is telling his apostles, including Judas, the warning concerning the one who's going to betray him. And that message would have been more for Judas than for any other human being. More for him. Jesus does not tell Judas, go do it. He's giving him warnings. This is not going to be good. And you do realize that Jesus doesn't say this sort of thing lightly or about every one. But he does say it about, in this case, about Judas. He does say it about him. And Judas is sitting or standing. Judas is there in the room. He is there in the room. And Jesus is telling him, you do this, and it would be better if you had never been born. It'd be better if you never existed. That you as an individual, you as a person, never existed at all because of what is going to be in store for you eternally. That is a warning that Judas should, and I don't know how you overcome this. I don't know how you overcome that kind of a warning. Judas had to have been so steeped in this, had to have been, that he just ignores the warning. Just ignores it and goes on. Now, in Matthew chapter 7, at the very end of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says this. He gives a comparison. You can call it a parable. He gives a comparison. He says, therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine, I will liken to him as a therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise builder. Whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them. You hear them and you do them. Then he says in verse 26, but whoever hears these sayings of mine and does not do them, he says that's a foolish builder. Built his house on the sand. Not a very good foundation whatsoever. The house will eventually fall. And he talks about a storm coming through, and great was its fall. All that sand just shifts. There is no solid foundation. It just falls. Whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them is wise. Whoever hears these sayings of mine and does not do them is foolish. Well, that's the same thing being shown in the book of Proverbs. That the book of Proverbs is giving the same thing. Proverbs 4:10, hear my son and receive my sayings, and the years of your life will be many. Now, if we go to chapter 1 and verse 18, we see, well, let's go to verse 8 first. My son, hear the instruction of your father, and do not forsake the law of your mother, for they will be a graceful ornament on your head and chains about your neck. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, come with us, let us lie in wait to shed blood. And continues on, talking about this, those that may entice him, or her for that matter, may entice someone. We will lie in wait for blood. And they're going to be stealing, and they're going to be killing, and we will have one purse. That means that we're all going to share in the take. We're going to share everything. In verse 18, but they lie in wait for their own blood. They lurk secretly for their own lives. Well, you know, that shows us that those that are this wicked have no respect for human life or for laws of this degree, that they may not have a respect for their own lives either. They may secretly be after their own lives as well, just despising themselves, hating themselves in all this. You know, just take a little side trip here concerning those of gangs and those of mobsters and the like, that in that kind of life, there's only three things that stop it. One is incarceration, and so they can't really do so much. You can do things in prison, obviously, and you have mob bosses in prison that they continue to do business. But incarceration, the hospital, or the morgue. That's what stops it. That is what stops it. It has to be something that is drastic to stop such things. And you can see by the behavior of some of these gang members, some of these mobsters, you can see a behavior of where, they don't think they're going to live very long. They don't think that they're going to die of old age. They don't believe that. And matter of fact, from their behavior, you can see that they know their likelihood they're going to die young, very young, and be stopped entirely. Now, let's go to, just very quickly, Ephesians chapter 4. I'm sorry, Ephesians 6. Ephesians 6 is where we need to be. And beginning in verse 2. Here is a promise, and it's the first, this is called the first command with promise. And it is the same command that's reiterated in Proverbs. The book of Proverbs would have come a long time after this had been given. Verse 2. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment, with promise. What's the promise? Verse 3. That it may be well with you and you may live long on the earth. There's the promise. There is that this, if you do this, this is what's going to be the benefit. This will be the result. This is what you can expect out of this. You honor your father and your mother, and this is what you can expect. This is that assurance that life is going to go a lot better for you. A lot better. And we can just expect that. But let's now go back to Proverbs chapter 4. And I want us now to look at verse 11. Verse 11. I have taught you the way of wisdom. I have led you in right paths. Here, the writer is saying, this is what I've already done. I've done my job. I've done precisely what I was supposed to have done. I did this, and I did this for you. If the parent did not love the child, the parent would not do this. Honestly. There's no other way around it. If the parent did not truly love the child, that is understanding there's a soul right there. There's a soul right there, and that soul is going to grow up. That soul is going to make mistakes. That soul needs to be guided by the Word of God. Needs to be guided. And here is this parent saying, I taught you in the way of wisdom. I led you in the right paths. I did this. This is what was accomplished. Now it's your decision. Now it's your decision. You decide what you're going to do with it. You decide. And like people are, we all have our will, and we all have our character, and we have our personality, and we make our choices. Everybody makes their choices, and people can surprise you as to what they will do. They can surprise you. Of some suddenly making great decisions, and you thought, wow, I never would have expected that. Or some making extremely poor decisions, foolish decisions, and you think, wow, I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that at all. But here is this thing: is your future will be determined by how you respond to this. Your future, which is eternal, will be determined by what you do, because you have been led, you have been taught, you have been shown these things. Accepting it is easy because you've already been taught it. Accepting it is easy because it's already been shown. You've been led down this. You know what it is. You know it. And it's easy to be where you've already been taught. You've already been shown. You've been led as a child. It's easy to do that. But still, that child growing up can decide no. That child growing up can just decide, no, that's not what I want at all. But the future is determined. The future that they have here on the earth, the future that they have in eternity, is going to be determined by their response to whether they're going to hear and follow or not. Let's go to Proverbs 22, very, very familiar verse. Proverbs 22 and verse 6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. This is a proverb. I did it again. Oh, no, this is a proverb. That's correct. I'm sorry. We've been talking about, I was talking about parables earlier, and I've got that in my mind. This is a proverb. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Well, what about this? Generally speaking, this is what helps the child. Not generally speaking, this is what helps the child. This helps the child to know that they truly were loved when they were young. They truly were young by those who are bringing them up. They truly were, but can they still depart from the way of right? The answer is yes. Why the admonitions if it's another? Let's just use a little bit of implication here. A little bit of inference. Here, being told, I've taught you, I've led you, hear and receive it. Is it possible that they refuse? Yeah. So you have this admonition and a repeated admonition. We've already read 3 of them from the book of Proverbs. 3 of these admonitions from the book of Proverbs. Continue in it. Do this. And I'm going back to what it says. I taught you, I led you. I taught you, I led you. If you're going down a different path, it will not be his fault. And when I say he now, I'm talking about God. You're going down a wrong path, it's not God's fault. If you're going down some place of error, some place of wickedness, it's not for a lack of God trying, because he's done a lot of work before we were even born. He has completed work before we even existed. And this now is our time to either accept him or reject him. But the admonition is accept him. The hope and the prayer is accept him. That is what we are to be doing. Now, with this, we have the author speaking directly or writing directly to the son, to the child, of what he has done and what the child needs to do for the rest of their life. Because realistically, we're going to be committed to something, and it's going to be for the rest of our life. Whether that life is short or whether that life is lengthy. We're going to be committed to something. What is wrong with being committed to this? What's wrong? Well, there's nothing wrong about it. There's everything right about it. What's wrong with following the will of God? How did that ever become wrong? We live in a world that has been so twisted of where what is good is now viewed as evil, what is evil is now viewed as good. It has just been turned upside down. And hearing words now being uttered in a public setting that just a few years ago would have been seen as madness. That's the talk. That's crazy talk. Well, guess what? That's where Satan takes us. takes us to things that we would not have said, we would not have done in earlier times, but slipping down that slope, continuing on down the path of sin, that's where it heads. And it doesn't stop there. It continues on. Now for us, we take that way of righteousness and follow Him. We take what we have been taught by Him and we hear it. Hear it and to keep it. And the lesson is very simple. The lesson is simple in this, that God has given us all we need. Do we care enough to hear it? Do we care enough to investigate, to prove it, truly prove it right or wrong? Truly, and we make note of that, having the honest jury. Truly seeing, is this the right path or not? And it's demonstrably provable. But you've got to be the one to prove it. And you've got to be the one with the jury. And whatever that comes back. Because all of us will be judged, but we're not going to be judged together. We're not going to be judged in groups of any sort. We're going to be judged individually. There are things I did you won't be judged for because I did it. There are things you have done I won't be judged for because you did it. And that's the way it is all the way through humanity, of personal actions, things that we have done, whether we listened or whether we just rebelled. And rebellion gets nothing good. Nothing. And as we were discussing just in Bible class, that word hell, that word Gehenna, there's a place, nothing about it sounds good at all. Everlasting fire, that's not good. Outer darkness, that's not good either. A place where the wicked are tossed for eternity, that alone sounds horrid. Rebellion gets nothing that's good. But following God, following His ways, following the wisdom that He gives us, brings about good results here and eternal results that cannot be compared to anything else. Nothing on this earth. Eternal results of a home in heaven. We ask this morning, if you need to respond to the invitation, the judgment will arrive, and this is our time to accept Him. Once again, if you need to respond to the invitation, we ask that you come as we stand and sing.